You know, you get this thing all cleaned up and it's still junk. But I guess it's time to make another video. Hello, my YouTube friends! As streamers, we want to give viewers the best experience possible. But when you're just starting out, I would much rather see you push the go live button and learn the ropes of running an entertaining stream. I don't want stream quality to ever get in the way of just going live. However, once you get in the groove and you're streaming regularly, it's time to up your game and fix some issues. The number one viewer pain point is dropped frames. Viewers want buttery smooth viewing experiences, and if they're taking the time to watch you, you owe it to them to deliver it. So today I'm going to show you how to troubleshoot and fix dropped frames on your live streams. We got a lot to get to, so you know what? Let's get to it! Dropped frames on your stream is much more likely to be hardware related than just about any other issue. They happen when you choose a resolution or frame rate that your hardware can't keep up with. Now, there are some things that you can do to maximize your hardware's chances of keeping up, so we'll cover those first. Optimizing your stream, and here's how we're gonna do it. First, be sure you verify that both your base canvas and your output canvas are the same. Not the same as your monitor either. The same as the resolution that you plan to be streaming in. Any difference here adds a layer of scaling to the encoding that you just don't want. Next, let's maximize the way that OBS talks to the computer by going to advanced and changing our process priority to at least high. Now this tells the computer that OBS should be treated as a very important app and processed first above a lot of other programs. Next, you want to go through any assets that you use on your stream. Transitions, videos, intros, alerts, anything that OBS has to run during your stream. Now make sure that they're all encoded to the same resolution and frame rate as your stream. You don't want to try to run a 4K video on a 1080 stream. Your encoder has to resize this stuff. I also like to re-encode everything to the WebM format. It makes it nice and tiny and easy for OBS to use. Now I usually use Shutter Encoder to do this. It's free and it can resize assets, change the frame rate, and change them to WebM format all in one pass. It's a cool little tool. Now we have our stream optimized. It's time to test. Let me show you how to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is open our task manager. You just right click on the bar, go to task manager, open it up. Then in OBS, we're going to go up here to our view and we want our stats. And so we just want to be able to view all of these things at the same time. We'll put it up here so it covers up that stuff. So stats is going to show us the CPU usage that's being used, our average time to render frames, and frames missed due to render or encoding lag. So this is what we're looking for here. And you can see I'm skipping 0 frames. Now what we're going to do with Task Manager is we're looking at our CPU usage, our GPU usage, depending upon how we're encoding it, and of course, our memory and network. Although network really isn't going to have anything to do with the kind of frames we're looking at right now. So what we want to do is go ahead and go live. For YouTube, you could just go live unlisted. For Twitch, there actually is a setting. If you go ahead and set up your stream to go directly, then you can enable bandwidth test mode and go live that way, and it will just be a test stream. So either one of those two ways will work just fine. Once you get up and live, what you're going to do is you're going to test all of your scene transitions going back and forth between one scene or another. Make sure your scene transitions work and make sure you're not getting any drop frames up here in the stats window. Then you're going to test all of the assets that you use. So run any videos, switch to every scene, make sure that every video and every scene and all that stuff is not dropping any frames. When you get to something that's not set up right, you're going to see it automatically start to drop or skip frames up here. And when you do that, Then you want to look down here and see what it is that's maxed out. Is it your CPU? Is it your GPU? Are you out of memory? Which one of those three things is maxed out that might be causing these frames to miss? Because that's going to tell us what we can do to actually fix the problem. So go through every asset, go through every scene, switch back and forth between every scene in different orders just to make sure that every single asset is logged so that you know what's actually causing the missed or skipped frames, and you know which aspect of your computer is struggling when you're dropping frames, whether it's your CPU, your GPU, or your memory. So that's pretty much how you test this. It's really pretty simple, and once you start to see these dropped frames and you look down here, it's going to be pretty obvious what's causing it. Okay, so we tested our broadcast and found some dropped frames. What else can we do about it? So if you are noticing that you're running out of memory or something like that, a good place to go is down here, see what you have running. Close out things that you don't need to be running. And that's going to free up some of the memory and give you a little bit more. Now, the other thing is make sure that you optimized your assets. The larger the asset that you're using, the more it's going to take up space in memory when it's running. To fix memory problems that are causing dropped frames, that's the easiest way. Close everything you possibly can on your machine that you don't need, and that includes browsers and Discord and all that stuff, and make sure that your assets are optimized. Now, if we're running into CPU issues, it's more than likely because you're using X264. So let's go into our output settings. Here you can see how I have mine set up. I do have an NVIDIA graphics card, so I'm using the NVIC encoder. However, if you don't have one, you're using X264. So you definitely want to make sure that your rescale is off. It shouldn't be on because we are broadcasting everything the same right here. And then down here, I use constant bitrate. It doesn't really matter. 9 times out of 10, if you're streaming in 1920 by 1080, you're going to be around 5,000 to 6,000 kilobits per second. So the first thing that you can do is try to lower your bitrate. Lower it from 6,000 to 5,000. And then test again. You can also change this up. You can go to super fast or ultra fast, which increases the speed at which it will encode your stuff, but it may also introduce a little bit of artifacting that some people don't really like. Most people probably won't notice, but this can actually speed up how fast your encoder will work and maybe stop some of the dropped frames. But the easiest way to do it is to lower your bitrate. Now, at one point or another, you're going to get to the point where you lower your bitrate way too much to stream in 1920 by 1080. It's just going to look like blurry and horrible. And what you have to do at that point is commit to going ahead and lowering your actual scale. And so you'd go in here and instead of 1920 by 1080, you change both of these to 720. And then you're going to go and rescale all of your assets to 720 to optimize everything. And then you're going to test again at 720 with probably a bit rate somewhere around 4,000 kilobits per second. And you're going to see if that works. And hopefully that's going to stop your dropped frame issues. Beyond that, you're kind of in a tight spot when you're using X264. Now, when we go over to encoders, we've got the NVIDIA encoder. And of course, there is one for AMD cards as well. And of course, there's a bunch of newer encoders that you can get depending upon your graphics card. Now, I've always used the NVIC encoder, and you can see my exact setup, 6,000 kilobits per second. And I have my preset set to slow for good quality and high quality with 2 passes and all this other sort of stuff. So this is how I have mine set up. And as you can see from the stats window, I'm not dropping any frames. However, if you're watching this, you are dropping frames. So the first thing that you can do is lower your bit rate from 6,000 to 5,000 and then see if you're dropping frames. If that doesn't work, maybe I'd go to 4,500, somewhere in there. If that's not working, then you might have to go with a different preset. So you're going to go with a lower quality setup. Try medium. This will encode it faster and be less stressful on your machine. You just won't get quite the same image fidelity that you would at 6,000 kilobits per second with the good quality on there. But sometimes you sacrifice a little bit of quality to keep those frames from dropping. It looks buttery smooth. Your audience is happy. These are the 2 settings that you're going to mess around with. You can also mess around with your rate control. CBR admittedly has a constant bit rate, which can slog the machine. You can go with something like CPQ or a variable bit rate. If you wanted to try these out, I hear a lot of people have pretty good success with CPQ at level 20, and I've never had to use it because I always like the quality that I get with CBR. However, we are trying things here, and these are the things that you would mess with in order to try to stop those frames from dropping and make your machine happier. And of course, this is what you would do if you are getting some problems with your GPU just maxing out. When you're dealing with any sort of video encoder like NVIC or something like that, that's your GPU. When you're dealing with X264, that's your CPU. When you're doing your testing and you see your GPU is like maxed out, well, that's when you're gonna come in here and you're gonna mess with your bit rate, and you're gonna mess with your rate control, and you're gonna mess with your preset to try to make things lighter on your computer. Now, generally speaking, I don't see a lot of big time frame problems happening with a video encoder unless you're trying to run at like 120 frames per second or something like that. If you're running anywhere from 30 to 60 frames per second, you shouldn't have a problem. However, if you're running 60 frames per second and you're noticing problems using an encoder, switching to 30 frames per second will probably resolve your issue without even changing any of these settings at all. If you want to make sure that you run at 60 frames per second, then you may have to just lower your bit rate, and that's going to really depend on how maxed out your GPU is. It also kind of depends on what you're doing. So if your GPU's maxed out, but you're also trying to run really challenging games or something like that, well, that could be a problem. What you can do is lower the resolution of the game, things like that, and that will really help to let your GPU breathe a little bit. So those are the things to look for and change to fix your frame dropping issues. Now, once you modify the settings, you have to run the test again. Hopefully it all checks out and you're good to go. Now, for live streaming, hardware does matter. It is really hard to get a machine without a dedicated graphics card to stream anything complex using X264. X264 is a great encoder, but it really uses your CPU to the max, and that doesn't leave a lot of room for other things like games or applications or adding guests. If you have already lowered your resolution as far as you want to go using X264, there isn't much else you can do other than getting a machine with a dedicated graphics card. Now you know how to fix the number one thing that viewers complain about on stream: dropped frames. What other issues do you see on streams that you want to see me cover here? Let me know about it in the comments. Also, I would love to hear what equipment you're streaming with. And if you want to fix all crashes in OBS, you should definitely check this video out. And if you're always looking for tools, tips, and tricks to help make you a better live streamer or YouTuber, subscribe to the channel. My name is Michael Feyrer Jr. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.